Welcome, everyone. I am MongoSlade. Today, we're going to be talking about Sinners, the new movie by Ryan Coogler featuring Michael B. Jordan. We're going to be talking about this. We're going to do a review and analysis of the movie. So, if you haven't seen it and you don't want it spoiled, please check out now. If you have no interest in it, then we're going to hear me talk about it. I always suggest people watch movies and read art pieces and books and things for themselves because you might get something different out of it. This is a project where a lot of people get a lot of different things out of it, but I'm just going to give you my thoughts and opinions and all that. And we're going to do some basic analysis. It is a movie very heavily rooted in Black culture. So if you have an issue with Black culture, uh, good luck because this movie is drenched in Black culture, which is why it's so popular amongst the certain people. But it's a good movie. All in all, I think it's a good movie. Is it a perfect movie? No. Is it the most perfect of movies? No, it's not. They have issues in the film as usual, but overall, I think the movie did quite well in telling the story that it intended to tell. Um, so let's get into uh, one of the many. Well, let's get into my analysis. Let's do that first. So, what's the plot of the movie? What is the movie even about? Okay. The movie centers around twin brothers named Smoke and Stack, who are two guys coming back to Mississippi after a sojourn to Chicago. It is unclear what they were doing in Chicago, but they got tons of money. So clearly they're criminals of some kind. Maybe they were into gambling. They don't really get too into what the two guys were doing in Chicago. It's not relevant anyway. But they've come back home to Mississippi to just open a juke joint. And they've got money and they go around recruiting old friends and family to work in the juke joint. They go and get their cousin, who they call Preacher Boy. One of them goes and gets an ex girlfriend to be the cook. They go and get another friend named Cornbread to watch the door. And essentially, that's the early part of the movie. Is the first 40 minutes or so are Smoke and Stack going around being absolutely terrible people to everyone that they meet and then sprinkling money on them to change their mind. Now, this was a positive, I thought, in the movie because it shows you that Smoke and Stack are not necessarily good guys. And the movie is called Sinners, and pretty much everybody in the movie is a sinner, is a person who is doing something ungodly in the film, but usually they're doing it for money. They're turning away from their normal, everyday, rather boring lives and going towards this den of iniquity that they call the juke joint. And part of this problem, of course, is Smoke and Stack coming around with all this money, sprinkling money on people. But like I said, they're very terrible people. They're running into various folks, and I think it was Stack that cussed out the mixed girl and told she basically was stalking him throughout the movie. He went up and he made some completely, totally disrespectful comments to Cornbread while he was in the cotton field. Um, they were just disrespectful to a whole bunch of people in the movie, like just mad disrespectful. And you kind of get a sense that you don't like these guys. Like I was like, man, I hope this movie doesn't end with these people still alive because that would suck. Considering how shitty they are as human beings. Now, in the early part of the movie, you're told about this sort of secret power of musicians that music is used to heal and to summon demons and things like this. And that's the that's the plot for the later part of the movie. because the early part of the movie is just the characters interacting, building the juke joint, buying the juke joint, building the juke joint, whatever. And then the party itself, the first night that the juke joint exists. The threat isn't even looming throughout most of the movie. It just kind of appears. Um, at about, I don't know, maybe an hour in, you get some, you get a white man showing up at the house of other white people. He's begging to be let in due to the fact that he's being chased by Indians. I mean, Indians, right? The Indians show up after the white people have let the other white guy in. The Indians say, "Hey, we're looking for a very dangerous man." And the white woman has a gun on the Indian and says, "Hey, there's nobody here like that." So the Indians leave. And then she turns to her room where her husband has been bitten by a vampire. And that's where the vampires come from. It follows basic vampire lore where you have to invite them into your home. They have shared memories. Of course, they're stronger than normal people. They drink blood, obviously. So, despite it has the same structure as From Dusk Till Dawn. From Dusk Till Dawn, of course, is the movie Quentin Tarantino, where it's like a heist movie where they kidnap this family and they take the family to Mexico, and they end up in a bar, and the bar ends up being infested with vampires. I mean, what a crazy twist that was. And that's the exact same thing here, except the bar is not filled with vampires already. The vampires are in pursuit of our main cast because of Preacher Boy singing in the juke joint. Now, it's an interesting bit because there's two musicians in the movie. One of them is Delroy Lindo, I think his name is, and he's an alcoholic, and the other is Preacher Boy. Preacher Boy, they didn't know he could play the guitar and that he had any sort of musical talent when they picked him up. They basically just picked him up because he's family and they brought him into the city. Just kind of, they have always had a good relationship with him. And now he's in the juke joint singing and playing the blues. And then there's this part where everything is mixed together. This part kind of confuses everybody because you start seeing DJs, you start seeing twerk videos, you start seeing Africans dancing, and people are like, "What's this about?" You know, to me, my interpretation of this is that they told you earlier that certain people have a musical ability that allow them to see spirits, to touch into the dead, but they basically just put the past and the present and the future all together on the dance floor. Basically, to tell you that everything is the same. Nothing really changes. What took place in Africa with the drums is the same thing that's happening here with the Delta blues, which is going to happen in the future with hip hop. That's basically what they're telling you. So if you get sort of confused, that's what I got out of it. And Preacher Boy's playing of the blues, it basically is because the blues historically has been seen as quote unquote the devil's music. Um, the devil shows up. The vampires, they actually show up. Now, their Smoke and Stack are protected because the vampires are white, and they don't want any white people in their establishment. So, despite the fact that the white people can sing and dance and they can play the guitar, they don't want the white people inside the juke joint. They don't want them in there. They really don't want any racial troubles whatsoever anyway. They don't want the white folks in the juke joint. And because they follow basic vampire lore, meaning you have to invite the vampire into the establishment in order for them to enter, they can't come in. Now you have the mixed white girl who has been following Michael B. Jordan II. What's Stack? I think that's the one. She's been following him around. She follows him into the juke joint. They have another argument. The white girl leaves. Well, the mixed white girl. She looks white, but she's mixed. And she runs into these people. They're playing the banjo and singing and all that. And she has a white husband, and she looks white. So there's a sort of, she is the one that lets the devil in, sort of. Like, you don't see anything happen to her. You actually see them, you see her pull a gun on them, and then she returns to the juke joint where she again seduces Michael B. Jordan, second character, Stack, and then she kills him. And now she's inside the bar. The weird thing is, once she's inside the bar, she runs outside of the bar, which is dumb. Like, you have all these targets inside the bar. But she leaves, and the party's over because Smoke's brother is dead now, and the party's over. They make everybody leave, but that just ends up being exactly what the devil wanted, because now all these people are coming from inside the bar out, and they're killing them all and turning them into vampires. So now the juke joint is surrounded by vampires. Now one of the characters in the juke joint is a cook. She is the lover of Smoke. She's a big hefty woman. He's a fat chick thriller, that's for sure. Um, so you got, um, she knows all about the magic and voodoo and all this sort of stuff. And she is the one who tells them all about vampires and how to defeat vampires, how to go against them and all that. And because Smoke and Stack were, I guess, soldiers, they don't say in like what, they didn't get too specific, but they were soldiers, so they know their whereabouts on the gun. There's also some Asians in the movie, like random Asians. I was like, wow, I didn't expect to see any Asians in this film. But the Asians are the ones who provided a lot of the supplies, for the juke joint, and they of course were invited. And when everybody left, the husband, the Asian man, he left. So obviously, when he left, he was killed by the vampires and turned into a vampire. Now, once he's turned into a vampire, he shares his memories with the lead vampire. At that point, when they come back, they're trying to get back inside of the juke joint to get to Preacher Boy. They specifically want Preacher Boy because they want his ability to play the music. That's what they want. And because the I guess you could just call it the devil, because that's essentially what it is. The devil wants Preacher Boy to mix the living and the dead all over again and that sort of thing. Of course, they're not going to let the devils in. Now that they know that they're vampires and they're evil and shit, they're not going to let them in. So they threaten to kill the Asian woman's daughter because she has a child that they left back home to leave to go to the juke joint. And this is the reason why they decide to just go to war with the vampires. That just really doesn't make any sense, but they don't have a choice. In order to save this woman's child, or at least to spare this woman's child, they decide to go to war with the vampires. So there's guns and they're eating garlic. They got all this stuff going on. They got Molotov cocktails. They have the big fight scene with all the vampires, in which only Preacher Boy and Smoke survive. And Preacher Boy goes home back to his old church where his dad is the preacher. And then he cannot walk into the church. And this is a very important thing, is he's not walking directly into the church. His father invites him in, and that's when he comes in. But they never show you that Preacher Boy is a vampire. They never show you that. But that little tidbit right there tells you that Preacher Boy is a vampire. Smoke, on the other hand, goes Rambo on some Klansmen at the end because he told the guy they bought the building from, if I see you and your Klan friends around, I'm going to kill you. And the devil tells them, hey, the Klan were going to kill you anyway, because he had killed some family members of the Klan or something like that. And he has their memories and all this stuff. So he was able to prepare Smoke for the Klan to show up. But of course, the vampires were all gone by that time. So I think it's a solid movie. You know, it had, again, a similar structure to From Dusk Till Dawn. There were obviously some issues that I had with the film. Oh shoot. Oh shoot. I blocked somebody by mistake again. This damn thing is in the way. So sorry, whoever that was, I blocked you. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I gotta figure out how to unblock people. Jesus Christ. Um anyway. Sorry. um that's essentially the movie. Now, there's a lot of themes, a lot of symbology in the movie. A lot of symbolism. One of them being that the blues is the devil's music, which I heard a lot growing up. It's hard to say why that is, but the blues, and this is just my opinion, the blues comes from gospel, and in some sense, it is a corruption of gospel music. There's always been this delineation that it was even going on in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. People, musicians, Aretha Franklin was a really big one. They get started in the church. They start singing for the Lord, and then they start doing secular music, quote unquote. And it's the secular music that becomes that brings all the problems that of the world onto them. I think Whitney Houston was another one where people tend to believe, like, hey, if they'd have just kept singing gospel, everything would have been fine. But because you want to be a superstar, you want to be a rock star, all of a sudden you're singing for the world, and the world is evil and corrupt. Therefore, and because the blues is secular music, it's evil and corrupt. So the super Christians, but they believe pretty much every form of music is the devil. I mean, they thought the jazz was the devil. They thought that funk was the devil, because there's cultures around this music, and the culture around the blues. We have discussed this before on this channel, because we read E. Franklin Frazier's "Roving Men and Homeless Women," a chapter from his book on the Negro family. We know that there's a culture around the blues. That blues musicians, they often travel from town to town. That's Delroy Lindo's character. He's a very well-known blues musician, and he's talking about how he doesn't really want to do their juke joint because there's a bunch of other juke joints that are around that have been around a long time, and he can go and do those, and they're in different towns or whatever. And Preacher Boy also was a blues musician, and he wants to use Smoking Stack's juke joint as an opportunity to leave the plantation. And so that's something that he wants to do. But also, because he was a younger man, the moment he gets out of town, he's away from the church, he starts to have impure thoughts, and he meets another man's wife who he fornicates with in the juke joint after he sings. That he ends up fornicating with some man's wife in the juke joint. And this very, very subject is what we discussed in the E. Franklin Frazier's Roving Men and Homeless Women. That you have people who they live small town, highly Christian lives. They go to the towns. The towns are looser in social pressure. People participate in the culture of the town. Sometimes these people are meeting loose women for the first time, and the temptation is too much. And that becomes that's Preacher Boy's story throughout the entire movie. Is that he's a young country boy with this talent, with this ability that could take him anywhere. He's got he's got a talent that is undeniable, but his father doesn't want him doing this. And eventually, Smoke and Stack, I forget which one it was, because unless they said the character's name, it's just Michael B. Jordan to me. I believe it was Smoke because he was even the more aggressive of the two. Um, he wanted Preacher Boy to go back home. He said, "Look, this is gonna be your last juke joint. That's enough of this. You got to go back home." And Preacher Boy was like, nope, you guys left the plantation, went to Chicago, came back with all this money. Now you got your own juke joint. He didn't got the first taste of tail. You know, he's like, no way, I'm not going back to that plantation. Mm-mm. I want to run the streets, brother. So that's his character arc. And I think it's a very good one because he started out as a good kid. He doesn't know that much about the world. Smoke and Stack are the ones that corrupted him. They introduced him to, this life, and they're responsible for him. And at the end of the day, they ended up dropping the ball. So it's basically like a good kid in a bad situation. The vampires are an interesting bit because there's not a whole lot known about them or where they came from or anything like that. They just kind of appeared, which is a little weird. Also, sometimes when the vampires, and this is what I like about the vampires in the movie, the devil in the movie, he's not just white. Okay, he's a cult leader essentially. So it gave me Jim Jones vibes. Like, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Jim Jones, but it's a whole lot of talk about togetherness and being in heaven, and we're all going to be one big family. He's not obviously a Christian, so it's not a big family in the Christian sense. They're going to be a big family in so much they're going to be a hive mind, and everybody is going to exist at the same time, and they'll share each other's thoughts and everything. But that was interesting to me that he wasn't just a vicious and vile monster. He had an almost sweet side to him. He talked about, wanting to be brotherly to his neighbors. He believes in equality. And look, we know that, and I think it was in the anime Frieren, right? Where they say, like, these demons, they don't really have feelings or personality. What they do is they mirror human beings. They pretend. And you can see in the movie that it's the exact same thing. For all their talk about equality and wanting to be brother and sister, you could tell that they're vampires because there's parts where, a guy is the Asian guy, he's trying to talk his wife into coming out of the house. Like, coming out of the juke joint. Like, come on, I got the car running, let's go. Meanwhile, there's a guy over there getting eaten. He's not freaking out. He's not having no response at all to it. He's just like, come on now, go. And yes, the Asians were talking like that. But then again, accents are what they are. So you had these bumpkin Asians, which was very entertaining. And he's like, come on now, go, come on out of there. And, this guy's getting chomped on over here. And he wasn't having any sort of response to it. So you can see that the vampires knew exactly what to say to black people to get them to let their guard down. They knew what to say to people to get the guard down. So that's a really good character piece right there, which makes me wish that they could have developed it more. Also, wish they could have developed it more in terms of having a vampire already on the inside. And a lot of people are questioning, like, how did the vampires get in? Or with the mixed girl, she got back into the juke joint, but there was no signs that she was a vampire. She wasn't bleeding. She hadn't been. She was clearly dead. That's how she became a vampire. But there was no physically visible signs of her being a vampire. There were no bite marks on her or anything like that. So that was weird. How did they kill these people and not shuffle their hair or bloody their clothes? Gozu 94 said, did you saw that final ending in the future? I don't think so. I don't think I've seen that part. But maybe I wasn't paying attention. But I like that element of the vampires as well. The decision to fight the vampires like 6 on 25 literally didn't make any sense. Uh, that literally was, I don't know about that strategy. Even with the Molotov cocktails and all the guns, it's like, okay, these people have guns, but they have no training, So I I just don't see the how that was going to work out for them, and it didn't. So it didn't. You say you see the bite mark in the sex scene. Maybe I didn't pay that close attention to the sex scene then. I was kind of creeped out by some of the sex scenes. I just thought they were unnecessary. You know, but that's Hollywood today. They have a bunch of sex scenes in these movies. But I think the movie was pretty good. Um, when it comes to black culture, there's so many different things in there that you see in these period pieces, these 1930 movies. You got the juke joints, you got plantations and cotton picking, you got the Delta blues usually got some kind of gambling, criminal element, running numbers if it's in the north, gambling if it's in the south. Um, you got great migration talk, and usually you got Klansmen, racism. You got all of that stuff in here. Some of my favorite lines in the movie is when Smoke went to go see his girlfriend, whose name I don't know, and she tells him, "I don't want none of your cursed money." And he says that all money comes with blood. And he starts talking about what he saw in Chicago. He said he didn't see any demons, he didn't see any magic. He only saw power, and money can give you that. Which tells you from this part of the movie how Smoke and Stack see the world. They don't believe in anything, really. They don't believe in anything but power. She is, of course, very spiritual, but she's like a voodoo priestess or something like that. She's like all shade with the candles and all that. And people got kind of frustrated because she was depicted as being sort of Haitian. And Annie, that's her name. Okay, Annie. So Annie was positioned as being sort of Haitian and in touch with all of these different things. And I like that scene. I like the scene that she knew something was up with these guys, that they were up to no good. And to them, there is no such thing, you know? And this is reflected in how they treat people. They treat people poorly throughout the entire movie. And that's one of the things that stuck out at me is you see all of these people and you do kind of want to see them punished, even divinely in a sense. Even though I don't think, the devil literally attacking their juke joint is divine punishment, but it's in a sense it is, you know. Um, but they're just terrible people, like they're just really bad dudes, and it's hard to say that they deserved it, but it's like it's not like they were the nicest guys in the world either. And one of my issues with the movie really is that Smoke and Stack felt like the same character. Is they weren't different enough. They looked differently. They had different girlfriends, but for the most part, they were kind of the same character. You know, usually when you have twins, you want to make them different, but those guys were just a whole lot of the same. And I didn't really like that element of it. I thought that this movie would have did better by making one of them softer. I think, you know, um, making one of them maybe more emotional, but the way Stack was treating the mixed girl, Mary, I think that was her name. I mean, he treated her like garbage. Told her to get the fuck out of here. Said that he was just using her mom for a warm bed and all this kind of stuff. It's like, my God, like these are absolutely horrific people. These people suck. They're pulling guns on each other. Smoke hits. I think he hit Choir Boy in the mouth with a pistol. Like these people just need to. They need to go. I was damn near rooting for the vampires, man. Damn near. It was in a movie that inverted things where the good guys were terrible, but the vampires only thing they did was kill people. But the way that they talked was a lot different from the way that Smoke and Stack spoke. They were talking about togetherness, equality, wanting to live as one and all this sort of stuff. While Smoke and helping each other even in a sense. While Smoke and Stack are just out for themselves for the most part. Everything is about what they want to do and how you fit into their plan. You know, and that scene with Cornbread was just absolutely when he was out in the cotton field and Stack shows up, waving money around, being super indecent. I'm like, whoa. Like there was so many people getting disrespected in this movie that didn't deserve it at all. Because most of the time they hadn't seen these folks in a long time anyway. And I was just like, this is odd. And you had I think no, it was Stack also that did the Irish beer trick to the alcoholic musician. So like these guys are just not good dudes. They're just not good dudes. But it's a good movie. Um, I saw people saying it was woke trash because because the vampires were white. I think that it was a good usage of the white skin. Like they're not because it wasn't that these guys were the vampires were bad because they were white. It was that it was convenient that the white people would trust each other in that scenario where he's saying I'm getting chased by Indians. It's easier to trust if it's another white man. Like, okay, let him in. And then he's able to turn these other white people. So now it goes from 1 to 3 based off of, you know, them having white skin. And then Mary, she goes to see about them because she has a white husband. She's got, white family members. She's light skinned. So she trusts white people. So she goes over and, that ends up being her downfall is that she trusted white people. Now you can say that's the message that you're supposed to get is you can't trust mixed breeds and you can't trust white folks. I think you do get that message in the movie, especially if you take into account, the first 3 vampires were white, and then the fourth vampire was half white, and then the guy who Smoke and Stack buy the juke joint from was a white guy who ends up, of course, being a Klansman because the Klan is everywhere. Is ubiquitous. And then, of course, Smoke goes full Rambo on the Klan the next morning. I guess you're just supposed to like not trust white people, so I get it. But I don't think there was a lot of talk about whiteness in the movie. You know, um, I looked at it from the perspective of they trying to tell a story about black spaces and black religion and black beliefs, and a lot of these black beliefs are if you look back at the time, even if you go back and read like James Baldwin or Zora Neale Hurston or whatever, and they're talking about jazz and the blues, you'll get this sort of same feel that blues musicians are sort of tragic artists. They always got these really devastating backstories, because that's what the blues portrays. It portrays a lot of heartache, struggle, and pain, and that's the story of a traveling blues musician. And that's what they're taking into this movie is they're showing you Preacher Boy's origin. They're showing you that hey, the blues comes from a specific place of suffering and pain, and you have to experience that. And in a sense, I keep trying to call him Choir Boy. Preacher Boy he's experiencing that as he goes through the various stages of the movie. He falls. I guess he kind of falls in love for the first time, only to lose that love in the end. He's rejected by his father, only to be accepted once everything hits the fan. And by that point in time, he's already lost everything anyway. He's lost his mentors. He's lost, the woman that he kind of fell for in town. There's nobody else left. And you don't see him kill the people in the church, but you're pretty sure he killed everybody in the church, because as he's driving the car, he has the torn up strings on the guitar, and he's crying and everything. But at the same time, maybe he's not a vampire because it was the middle of the day, which also kind of begs the question when it comes to vampires in sunlight. Is I think I'm not sure, but it seemed to me like maybe the vampires were out during the day as well. I'm trying to remember when the vampire showed up to the house, if it was the daytime. I don't think it was nighttime. I think it was the day that he was running around in the day. But it looked like it might have been, in some trouble. But there might be some inconsistencies there, or maybe it's just a detail that I missed. But overall, I think it was a good movie. I certainly think it's worth your time. It's 2 hours. It probably could have been shorter, but it does a good job of developing all of the characters. And you get it. You get every character wants something, and they get a piece of what they want right before the world goes to shit. So that's a good thing, because once everything starts hitting the fan, you see what the characters have to lose. And it's always a relationship, you know, somebody that's very, very close to them that's gone, which I liked. I genuinely liked that. So let's talk about the David Mamet questions, and then we'll get into some of the. In fact, before we get into that, though, Gozu says it was sunset. The vampire had burn marks while running to the white people's house. That's what I was thinking in my head. Is that I do remember the dark spots on him, but I couldn't tell if that was because he had been fighting with the Indians or because he was out in the sun. So that was a good catch. Yeah. Okay. So Philip Brown also said it was sunset. All right. So one of the influences of the movie, obviously, like I said, is the movie Dusk Till Dawn, which is a Quentin Tarantino movie. But another influence of the movie is from a blues musician by the name of Robert Johnson. Now, Robert Johnson is an interesting case because he was one of the first people to, when they sort of started this legend about uh, blues singers or musicians selling their soul to the devil. Robert Johnson was one of the first guys that this sort of applied to. And there's a couple of articles on this guy, but this one that I'm going to use is from the Magnolia Tribune. It's a Mississippi paper. It says that Robert Johnson was born to a sharecropper family in Hazelhurst, Mississippi in 1911. As you could tell, if you look at um, the way that Preacher Boy is set up here, he was born on a plantation in the early 1900s. I say he's one generation removed from the abolishment of slavery. He used to work out in the fields. Um, he sung songs about oppression and, of course, obviously oppression. It said he started playing blues in the juke joints, and he got married. Uh, and it says here that he died at 27 years old. He had 29 songs recorded, and those were not released until the blues became popular in the 1950s. So there was only 2 photos of Johnson and no video footage, and his death certificate wasn't even discovered until 1967. But the most important thing here is he was supposedly the blues musician who sold his soul to the devil in Rosedale, Mississippi. And there's a bunch of documentaries and stuff. I haven't seen them based on him, which is why I probably would have just quoted those documentaries. But I literally just watched this movie like 15 minutes before I started this live stream. So there's obviously going to be some things missing. But it says media and mystery have long suggested that Robert Johnson went down to the crossroads in the Delta, where he sold his soul to the devil for a supernatural musical talent. Now, an interesting bit here is if you know a little bit about voodoo, which is prevalent in the movie Sinners, Papa Legba is the Loa of the crossroads. So if you say like somebody sold their soul to the devil at the crossroads, it was probably Papa Legba. Okay. Um, of course, they don't say that, but they do give you that sense that perhaps while he was fighting, going eye to eye with the devil at night, that Preacher Boy may have sold his soul to the devil at that time. They show a buddy guy at the end of the movie too. I guess they're supposed to saying like that's who Preacher Boy became over time, as he became sort of Buddy Guy, a very famous blues musician, which is okay. I don't mind that. I don't mind that. So it says Robert Johnson himself did not do anything to stop the myth of what happened at the crossroads. If anything, he perpetuated it. His lyrics ooze with references to walking alongside evil and hoodoo references linked to lore of old African magic. If those examples aren't blatant enough, he had a song titled Crossroads, in which Robert, referring to himself as Bob, fell to his knees, begging for help, knowing dark gon' catch me here. Johnson's family, however, suggests that he didn't sell his soul to the devil, but instead spent that mysterious year and a half with Ike Zimmerman, another super talent in the blues world. The Johnsons say that Robert had gone back to Hazelhurst areas to find his father Noah, and instead met Zimmerman. The two would meet at Beauregard Cemetery for Zimmerman to teach Johnson. Because there was no crowd there to complain about the noise he was making, in this version of the legend, he spent all his time for those 18 months honing his craft and then returned to the Delta juke joints where his talent amazed all and began to pave the way for what we know as the blues today. Apparently, there's a Robert Johnson Foundation now. Okay, not bad. There's a couple of articles on this guy. Let me see if there. I put another one in the Discord. I just clicked the first one I saw. Ooh, that's the one I just read. This is another one. This is from Rolf Potts. It should say mostly the same thing. Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil in Rosedale, Mississippi. It says there are contenders in the myth of Robert Johnson's devil-purchased soul, and the crossroads of US 61 and US 49 in Clarksville is where most blues tourists pay their respects. Of course, they're talking about other bands that have done songs called The Crossroads or whatever. Of course, Bone Thugs and Harmony did a song called The Crossroads, which may or may not play into this. But another great musician, Jill Scott Heron, did a song called "Me and the Devil" right before he died. And he said, "Me and the devil walking side by side." You know, Jill Scott Heron or Gil Scott Heron. He was a poet, most notably for "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," "Me and the Devil," "Whitey on the Moon." He did all these sort of revolutionary art pieces and kind of did. It's kind of funk blues ish music throughout the 60s and 70s up till his death, which was probably I think 2017, 2018 maybe. He died a very old man, but he also suffered from a heroin addiction. So when he made that song "Me and the Devil," I naturally thought, of course, there's two things. There's that the old wives' tale of blues singers selling their soul to the devil, but then there's also heroin. You know, like "Me and the Devil" could just mean him and heroin, you know. So that's interesting. But that is one of those black culture elements that stuck around and that people believe that often. And you've seen that this whole thing about people selling their soul, it just kind of goes throughout. It just goes through everything, right? Um, where anybody who reaches a certain level of success have their soul to the devil, or sold their buttocks, as Forrest Gump says. You dropped me in the buttocks. Mark Forrester says people talk about it's woke, but it takes place during Jim Crow. True. Um, in my opinion, it's not woke enough that I think it's off-putting. It doesn't preach a message. If you're paying attention, you will, all the vampires are white. The first four vampires are white and a half. And then you got Klansmen at the end and all this kind of stuff. The Klan was going to double cross them anyway. But that doesn't really play that much of an influence in the movie. Again, you see these people, they're just terrible people, you know? Well, Smoke and Stack are just bad people. I shouldn't say the entire cast, because most of the cast didn't do anything wrong. They just get wrapped up with these very bad dudes. Yep, the Crossroads. So, very interesting stuff here that Ryan Coogler was playing around with. A lot of people also get all twisted up because he was talking about writing this and approaching this from a foundational Black American perspective. So all of the ADOS people started flipping out. Uh, I don't care. I want to read that, as a matter of fact, because I want to just be a little bit more thorough. I don't want to end this thing early. So I just want to. I'm gonna put FBA. Let's see here, because Yvette Carnell is really bad. She's mad as hell. But I don't think it. I mean, if it's supposed to mean the same thing, it doesn't matter. A lot of people are very upset with this guy. um, let's see. I'm looking for the video. Is not. I'm trying to avoid all of these people who have opinions on the guy. I want to see what the guy said, not what. Not what. I don't want to hear what other people think about what he said, because that's poor framing. I'm glad that the movie is doing very well. One of the things I have discussed on this channel and other channels is the need for Black people to do other kinds of movies. And I am a little bit on the frustrated side that it's a Black horror movie that still centers white people as being the villains and still talks about racism. And from that perspective, I am still kind of frustrated that the movie doesn't do enough. At the same time, though, it was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be in terms of wokeness quotient. Not at all. And people are talking about his contracts and everything. Who cares about that shit? I don't care about that. Damn, I thought the Atlantic was gonna let me read the article, but nope. Let's see if this is going. What is this talking about here? What the hell going on? Oh, we heard tale of a party.
Irish. You're vampires.
Yeah.
And going there musically. I wonder if you could talk about that and also some of the casting with that.
Oh, I'm obsessed with Irish folk music. My kids are obsessed with it. Look, my first name is Irish. I think it's not known how much how much crossover there is between, like, African American culture and Irish culture, and how much that stuff's loved in our community. It was very important that our vampire our master vampire of this movie was unique and as specific as the situation was. It was important to me that he was old, but also that he came from a time that pre-existed these racial definitions, so that he would be extremely odd, and it would all seem odd to him, but also that he would see it for what it was and offer a sweet deal, if that makes sense, and that the music was just as beautiful.
You don't need no saving.
Yes, he did.
All right, so okay, why are the vampires Irish? Oh, okay. There's a lot of relationships between the Irish and blacks, and in the deep South, there's going to be some crossover. There's going to be a little bit of that. So I see where he got that from. Why they sing Irish folk songs, though, I have no idea. I don't think he properly explained that one. But I'm not tripping. I think the movie was pretty good. I understand why a lot of black conservatives are just they just rush to the woke thing. Look, you're dealing with people in Hollywood. Obviously, they don't think the same way you do about politics and race and things like this. They clearly are not going to move towards your position on this. They're just not going to. So the idea of just being upset that something is quote unquote woke is like, unless it's absolutely the drizzling shits and it's actively harmful or actively saying, something negative about large groups of people, I typically wouldn't pay that too close attention. I mean, it is ridiculous that, all the vampires are white and all this stuff, but I kind of knew that going in, and I knew that without seeing the movie. That when I saw that one vampire was white, I was pretty sure that all of them were going to be white. So, I mean, I'm not really tripping on that. All right, let's get into the David Mamet questions, because this one's a difficult one to analyze from this perspective because it's so weird. Like, the first question is, what does your hero want? Well, it depends on who you consider the hero of the movie. Like, if Smoke and Stack are the heroes of the movie, what they wanted was to open a juke joint back home in Mississippi, and they did that, right? If you say that the hero of the movie is Preacher Boy, well, he's looking for an opportunity to get off of that plantation. So it's different. Sometimes you can invert this and say, what does the character that's moving the plot forward, which I guess could be the vampires, like what does the devil want? Well, the devil wants all these people's souls, but most importantly, they want Preacher Boy's soul because he has the ability to blend the living and the dead with his musical abilities. 2, what's standing in their way? Well, if you're looking at Smoke and Stack, who just want to open up a juke joint, well, they have all the resources and they get all the resources they need pretty quickly. They've already got tons of money. They find the building in the early part of the movie and get it with no problem. So that's not a concern at all. If you move the hero position to Preacher Boy, then I guess Smoke and Stack stand in the way, considering they want him to go back to the plantation after the juke joint, and he doesn't want to go back. And that leads to a conflict between them in the juke joint, in which they pull a gun on him. I don't remember which one it was. So I'm pretty sure it was Smoke, because again, he was the more aggressive of the two. 3, what happens if they don't get it? Well, nothing happens if Smoke and Stack can't open a juke joint. I mean, life just goes on. All of these major characters are doing something productive with their lives when Smoke and Stack show up. It's not like anybody's sitting around waiting for these guys to show back up, except Mary, of course. Everybody else has moved on and they're doing stuff. But Preacher Boy doesn't want to be stuck on the plantation. That's something he doesn't want. And he has this musical ability, and he doesn't want to waste it. And wasting that musical ability is a legitimate fear that you could have. And so it says, for why now? Well, the story is happening now because Smoke and Stack have opened the juke joint, and Preacher Boy is showing what he can do. So now you've seen that he has this ability, and this is what attracts the vampires to the juke joint, is his ability to summon spirits. I guess you could say spirits from the past and spirits from the future, and all this sort of stuff. And the devil calls them his people. He wants to see his people again, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. But that's why all of this is happening now. Yeah. Mark Forster says, "Do you think the success of this would at least give other Black directors a chance to think out the box and take a chance to put something different, and for us to support it?" Well, yes and no. No, because Jordan Peele does similar movies to this, in so much as these are movies that are supposedly horror movies, but still have that racial element to it. So it's almost like they're not really doing anything different. Again, I did like the structure of it, from Dusk Till Dawn, because I love that movie too. So I did like, that he borrowed from that, and I saw a lot of people complaining about that too, that he sort of stole the structure from Dusk Till Dawn. It's like, well, he did it. He did steal that, but it's okay. It's not like it's the first time it's ever been somebody's ever stolen an idea from somebody else. It's okay. Ain't nobody's gonna die from that. But I was not thrilled when I heard that Michael B. Jordan is going to be recreating the Thomas Crown affair. I didn't like that. That movie has been made twice already, right? Like Steve McQueen's version is fantastic, and Pierce Brosnan's version is good too, really good. I don't know if we need the Thomas Crown affair just with Negroes in it, though. I don't know. But to answer the question Mark Forrester asked, I don't think that it's a huge risk that's being taken here. Black art still centers white people for some reason. They're just obsessed with white folks. It makes sense because it's a period piece, is in set in the 1930s. But at least it wasn't as prevalent as it probably would have been if it had been made by a less skillful artist. Like if it was made by a true hack. Like a lot of people are saying this guy's a hack, yada yada yada. If that were the case, I think the story and a lot of the other things would have been more ham-fisted. The fact that it wasn't so ham-fisted actually shows that he has some level of restraint over the way that he decided to tell the story. Gozu says Peele has another movie coming out. Him. I'm pretty sure it's more of the same, more grievance shit. I don't really like any of those movies anyway. I like vampires though, so I'm also partial to vampires. It's my favorite monster type, and I think he did good when it comes to vampires. They were vicious. They were sort of again, they were different in so much they were a lot more jolly than vampires usually are, but they still had that sort of aggressive animalistic nature that you want out of vampires. Everything about them is odd because they're just mirroring humans. Once this person is dead, their soul is gone, They're just a puppet for this devil vampire to use to get what he wants. You know, the person doesn't really have any sort of personal will anymore. All right. I suggest everybody go watch the movie. I give it a thumbs up. Thanks everybody for stopping by. I appreciate it. Talk to you guys later.